Hello, government students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for Chapter 7, Section 2, Taxing and Spending Bills. So, we're going to talk a little bit about how the House and the Senate influence tax bills. But the key here is to remember this. Anytime that we're introducing legislation that's going to have an impact in either raising taxes or lowering taxes, all of those bills have to originate in the House of Representatives. Okay, there's a reason for that. And one is there are far more representatives than there are senators. And that would mean that if I, the constituent back home, is upset with what Congress is going to do, either raising my taxes or lowering my taxes, I can easily get a hold of my representative and tell them how I feel about that. So there is a committee in the House of Representatives that is usually the committee that deals with tax bills. And that committee is a weird one. It's called the Ways and Means Committee, which, you would think it would be easier to say a tax committee. But the Ways and Means Committee is the committee that, for the most part, really hears this type of legislation. They can accept or reject any kind of presidential request to um, basically increase taxes or cut taxes. And they can also make the rules to determine who pays what taxes and receives what tax benefits. I will say this, the Ways and Means Committee, as far as prestige, is one of the more prestigious committees in the entire House of Representatives. And individuals who serve on that certainly are people who are probably a little more recognizable within the news because they get a lot of attention and there's certainly a lot of power involved in that. All right. Because the House is always going to be the source of origin for tax bills. The Senate has a committee that will eventually look at these requests. So, once a tax bill goes through the House, eventually it has to go through the Senate and it has to go to a committee. The committee that's going to deal with that is the Finance Committee, which to me is probably a more obvious name than maybe Ways and Means, but who am I to say? The Finance Committee, what do? They propose amendments to these tax bills. So the House might have passed, um, their bill. Once it goes to the Senate, the senators can add things to it. They can also eliminate certain provisions that senators don't like. And eventually, you're going to find that pretty much every tax bill is probably going to go through a conference committee to kind of iron out the differences between both houses of Congress. All right, other things that you should know as far as tax bills. The thing to remember is all tax or revenue bills have to begin in the House. The Ways and Means Committee is the one who shapes it. And when we talk about debate on the floor, there are what we call closed rules. In other words, certain specific rules about like how much time can be used for debates, what kind of amendments can be added and such. It's certainly highly and strictly regulated. In the Senate, as we mentioned before, they can offer other amendments. The Finance Committee is really responsible for this. They also can debate on the tax bill under some open rules. In other words, they can debate as long as they need to kind of eventually come to some type of decision within that House of Congress. All right, moving on. Spending bills. You can hear a little bit about authorization bills and appropriation bills, and eventually spending bills or spending money. Um, when we talk about any of these are things that we have to determine how we're going to put money forth. Um, when we talk about appropriations, this is usually money that's collected by tax dollars, and we have to determine how that's going to be spent. And really, authorization bills kind of works kind of in a similar way. All right. So, how the House and the Senate appropriate money. There is an appropriation committee in both the House and the Senate. And what do? Well, they get to receive, review, and amend appropriation requests from executive agencies. Executive agencies are those agencies created under the executive branch, and for the most part, they need a budget to operate on, and hence they're going to be asking for certain monies. So this could be talking about money that the Defense Department needs, or the Department of Education, or the for the most part the Energy Department and the Department of Commerce or such. They make decisions to cut or increase agency budgets. They also report on all the bills to the executive branch of government. So that way they know what's going to happen if they're going to be looking at a shortfall as far as revenue, meaning that they're not going to have as much money as they had the previous year. That way they can determine what they need to make cuts on. What they can't do is the following. One, they can't kill a bill. Okay, Appropriations Committee, they don't have the power to do that, which is different than a lot of the other committees that we see in Congress. They also have to be aware of like the uncontrollable expenditures and entitlements. There's When we talk about entitlements, this is money that has to be given out. So when we talk about like Social Security, that's a great example of an entitlement, that it doesn't matter what the economic situation is currently, you're always going to have to pay that money to those people who are entitled to it. Okay. Uncontrollable expenditures, sometimes during times of war or national crisis, that can cause, unexpected situations to occur that are going to require a lot of money to resolve certain issues. And the Appropriation Committee, they can't control that. And a lot of times they can't always foresee that those things are going to happen. All right. Thank you very much.